This is Sybert signing into Red Alert 3 on the map Infinity Isle, spawning as the yellow allies. On the left side, we do have, from teammates, he is Vindies. His opponent on the right side, spawning as the blue Soviets, he is Vindies and Dankal, who most of you should be familiar with. Allies versus Soviets, not a matchup we see very often, and it is not going to be a dual racks out of Dankal. But is it going to be a dual racks? No, it's not out of Vindies either. So that is going to be quite an interesting opener, and really, it's not all that interesting. It just means we're not going to be seeing a crazy amount of infantry. We still could, but most likely we will not be seeing a crazy amount of infantry. And the roars are actually perfect enough to stop the advance of Vindies' dog. So that's going to be very nice for Dankal. He's going to be able to secure his oil derrick, or he should be able to, as long as he doesn't mess up with these bears and lose them all to that one dog or something silly like that. But he will also be getting a scout off, which of course he should be able to spot the second refinery going down very soon, and he'll be like, okay, so you're opening up 100% standard. It's not fast airfield, it's not fast naval yard, nothing like that. As, okay, yeah, the second refinery did go down. He isn't doing anything crazy, so that's good to know for Dankal. And it is going to be War Factory after second refinery. Typically, this means sickles, maybe some terror drones, but usually it's, hey, you know what, I want to be a little bit safe. You're not necessarily going to be putting on aggression with it, but you want to be a little bit safe. And there is actually going to be the airfield, so it should be Bullfrog first out of this War Factory, since that airfield is spotted. The reactor is going to be going down, so Dankal is going to be looking for a third refinery relatively quickly. And the first Vindicator should be popping out relatively soon. It would be quite surprising if it actually was an Apollo, but no, it is a Vindicator, and Vindies is on top of his shield micro, who is doing his best to keep that little Peacekeeper alive. Vindicator is going to be using all of its bombs on those bears, which means, actually, it is going to be a sickle first and the Bullfrog follow-up. So Dankal could be potentially losing a sickle to this Peacekeeper and Vindicator combo, or the Bullfrog might get up there relatively soon, but a second Vindicator is actually, oh no, never mind, there's not a second Vindicator, so as long as there's only one Vindicator, Dankal can still do a fair bit of damage. Shields do come up, all of the conscripts have been eliminated except for this one, and now there are two Bullfrogs, a couple of more could be added on, but that Vindicator does go down. Definitely a mistake there from Vindies. That's 1,200 credits down the drain. He just dropped 2K on that refinery. So he's going to be a little bit strapped for cash, and currently he's only got the Peacekeepers, which with some extra excellent control, Dankal should not be losing this sickle, although he potentially will be getting it taken out by the Vindicator if it decides to move out. As long as he keeps a couple of these Bullfrogs with this army, he should be relatively okay, and he might actually be going for a fourth expansion out to the water. As you can see, his MCV is headed down towards that direction, and the Vindicators do show up, but they aren't able to quite stop the Bullfrogs. However, this sickle may actually be getting taken out in these last few seconds here, as the conscripts, or the Peacekeepers rather, were getting some nice shots off, and this Vindicator, is he going to be going for the sickle? He most likely will. And there is going to be the jump, but Vindies is a, oh, good control there by Vindies. I figured he was going to drop all the bombs, and actually that is a very nice Vindicator. He gets the scout off on the third refinery. He sees absolutely everything from his opponent, and the fact that the MCV is out of position, and actually it is not going to be a fourth expansion. However, it is going to be a terror drone, but Vindies has wisely thrown down a seaport. He canceled whatever was building, potentially a Riptide, so he is not going to be getting out any sort of defense. But when it's a terror drone and the naval yard is this close, you don't even need any defense. However, you will be needing some defense against the Twin Blades, which will most likely be coming eventually. The fourth refinery will be going down relatively at the same time for these players, unless Vindies decides to go for armor facility or barracks, or maybe even an additional power plant before that. First Riptide is out. Vindies doing a good job of cleaning up the map and making sure that he's staying on top of things. Dankal is going to be making sure that those Peacekeepers do not do anything too silly to his oil derrick there. And the fourth refinery is about halfway done for Dankal, but is he going to be able to actually keep it up and running? Because if Vindies goes for cryocopters, which is definitely going to be a good idea, not that he has them right now, but if he ends up going for them, oh, hold on, we do have Bullfrogs going to be getting eliminated, and that is the majority of the anti-air for Dankal. Dankal needs to get a super reactor up relatively quickly, and he has not started one just yet. We should be seeing it added on relatively soon here, so we can start to get that tech up, whether it be for the airfield or the hammer tanks. We need to be seeing it happening right now. There's the super reactor. because once these Vindicators start thinning out the Bullfrogs, it can be hard to get back ahead and get into a strong position. And then if you've only got Sickles and Bullfrogs trying to deal with a crazy combo of like a million Peacekeepers and Vindicators, it can be extremely difficult to do. Again, this Terror Drone, it has almost no chance of doing anything at all. All of the refineries should be walled up, the exception being this 4th refinery, which the Terror Drone is quite far away from. And Vindies, a nice little subtle thing is that he waited for the Harvester to actually get on top of that refinery, so it splashes the refinery. As you can see there, Dankal has to waste money on that repair, and if he doesn't, then he's running the risk of that refinery getting taken out, which is a far worse choice. And this is what Dankal says. He's like, hey, you know what? Oh, he does actually skip getting... Oh, no, he did actually get the Harvester there, but he did unfortunately get taken out by that Vindicator. So some nice play by both players, but yeah, Dankal was like, hey, all right, you've got a Naval Yard? That's okay. I can work around that. And he drops down that orbital junk, and he's able to take down the Harvester anyways. So he was able to use that support power quite effectively. Tier 2 is down, Cryocopter's already out on the field, and we'll have to see if the Bullfrogs can deal with this, because we have no MiGs just yet. And I mean, if we go for MiGs, then our opponent may very well be going for Apollos, but currently, until any of those Vindicators go down, Vindies cannot get any Apollo, so this would be a great opportunity. Now that hammer tanks are out, it's definitely going to be hampering the effectiveness of this infantry. Dankal, unfortunately, going to be losing a hammer tank a little bit there to a bad rally point. No, he will not. As it shrinks down, it will be getting away. The Bears rushing forward, cleaning up pretty much all of the infantry. The Bullfrogs going down, but is it going to be enough to stop the army? Yes, it mostly will, because that hammer tank is not doing anything at all, and since Dankal doesn't yet have a crane, or at least not to my knowledge, he may actually be... Nope, he's going for a battle lab, so quick tier 3 out of Dankal, but at the same time, he has no repairs, which means that hammer tank, while it's still alive, it's not actually going to be very effective for the rest of this game until he starts getting some repairs out there. And Vindies, on the other hand, he is mining on 4 refineries, as is his opponent. So both of these players are on roughly equal economic footing, but we'll have to see. Maybe once Twin Blades come out, things will be changing, as Dankal has some really good Twin Blade combos that he's able to use pretty effectively. Bullfrogs getting cleaned up by those Vindicators, and also the MiGs are going to be pretty effective. We'll have to see if Natasha comes out after this Tier 3 finishes up. And Vindies, is he going to be continuing on this barracks airfield play? I think that's definitely a mistake. You need something hardier on the ground when you're going into the mid to late game. So he should be throwing down an armor facility relatively soon, and I would be quite surprised if it was anything else. The oil derrick does get eliminated, as does that civilian structure. But what was it that Vindies was actually building? It's a second airfield. I do not really like dual airfield play in most situations. And most of the time, it's just not good enough to really combat your opponent if your opponent is going for a stronger ground army. But we'll have to see, because with Cryocopters, you can certainly make things happen, because, of course, Cryocopters, in a way, basically eliminate the kind of strength of hammer tanks against infantry, and that's, of course, you shrink them down, and then suddenly they're terrible at killing infantry. One Twin Blade is going to be heading in. It should be having a Twin Blade, or a Terror Drone inside of it, I would imagine. That's why it's just one Twin Blade and nothing else. But there is going to be the Terror Drone inside of that Prospector, and he can actually move on to start to kill something else. A couple of more Bullfrogs do get eliminated. You have to... Oh, actually, a Hammer Tank as well. So a Hammer Tank and I think one Bullfrog did get eliminated. The Twin Blade is going to be running off, but the Apollos will be catching it, and also the Hydrofoil. You will get some shots off on the Hydrofoil, but the Hydrofoil can get the repairs. And Vindies already rebuilding that ore collector, so good on him. And I mean, the Twin Blade and the Terror Drone went down, so that's not very effective of a harass for Dankal. I mean, of course, it is going to be stopping that mining, but that's not necessarily the biggest thing in the world. V4s are now out, but they have been shrunk down, and Dankal has to make sure that he controls absolutely perfectly. He's got a nice number of bears mixed into this army, but the hammer tanks, of course, without the ability to crush, you gotta be careful with allied infantry. They're quite powerful, and when you can't crush any of them, you find yourself in a very problematic situation. Kirovs are also out, but they got spotted nice and early by Vindies, which means he knows he can start sicking. Potentially, he might have to pull his Hydrofoil all the way across the map, but he can start sicking his Apollos on them as soon as he gets in range. And, I mean, as you can see right now, he's got one Apollo already going to be getting that damage out. Where are the MiGs to support? One is hanging out down here, but that's not going to be enough to stop that Apollo unless Vindies just doesn't pay attention. Dankal might just be going for a big, strong frontal push, keeping his MiG there to protect against the Vindicators. The Apollos need to go ahead and get on in there, and the hydrofoil might be forced to be brought in. 2 V4s are on the map, and Vindies is actually forgetting about his cryocopters, one of them almost going down, and the Bullfrogs almost do both get eliminated. However, one does still stand, or rather 2. One got shrunk down as well, and the other one does still stand. The Kirov is going to be heading in, but it looks like it won't actually be doing anything. Oh no, Dankal actually forgetting about his Kirov a little bit there. He's going to be trying to get that oil derrick, but I don't actually know if he's going to be getting the oil derrick. It will not fall. The V4's at the front, and Natasha is now on the field, making her way to the front lines, which will help Dankal deal with these infantry. 1 terror drone does spawn out of, I think, one of those V4s, so we'll have to see if he's able to do anything with that. He may be able to get some pretty good shots off on the infantry. Cryoblast does fire off. Is it going to be stopping any of this army? It will be locking down a couple of infantry there on the fringes. However, this attack is pressing forward, and the hammer tanks are not being micro to the best of their ability. However, they do get the crushes off, so I guess it doesn't matter all that much, and the V4 should be getting a couple of more rockets fired as soon as they can to go ahead and sink that airfield. The airfield does go down, and Dankal is going to be pushing forward, although he does eliminate one of his hammer tanks purely just by splash damage there. A little bit of friendly fire, unfortunate for Dankal. Vindies is going to be holding the line potentially with this Mirage tank. We'll have to see if it's actually effective, and there is going to be the multi-gunner turret on the front line, potentially doing some damage to these V4s, but they will be able to escape without too many losses. And let's see, the airfield went down for Vindies. Dankal lost a bunch of units, but I'm not sure who actually came out ahead just in terms of overall units lost. And oh, this Mirage tank is going to be getting sniped. There goes the pilot. However, Natasha has been revealed for certain. And actually, those Vindicators coming very close to death. The fully heroic one does go down. And look at that, Natasha is going to be able to protect that Mirage tank. And actually, very close there to that Mirage tank actually getting sniped. A conscript should be produced to go ahead and take that Mirage tank over. The engineer heading out for the observation post. It wasn't an MCV cell, so the engineer was actually produced other than that, but that will give some nice scouting ability to, or some scouting knowledge rather, to Vindies and Dankal. He missed his opportunity. That Mirage tank is now dead. And, I mean, that's really the only thing that Vindies could do in that situation. We might actually see the MCV get moved down for a potential aircraft carrier. I kept thinking of something else, but, well, one more Vindicator does get eliminated, and also the cryocopters are going to be going down, which is very unfortunate for Vindies. He needs to be keeping those alive. Those are units that he does not want to be rebuilding at this time. He wants to be able to focus on building the higher tier 3 units while keeping his other units alive. And the Apollo goes down as well. Definitely a mistake there from Vindies, but he's starting to push forward. And as long as he doesn't lose this army too much to this artillery, a nice Aegis shield there. That's exactly what he needed to hold off the barrage. But is he actually going to be able to make it stop? The Javelin Trooper will most likely be getting trapped by a couple of these bombs. But no, and I think the satellite downpour should be coming in here as the harass fires off at the same time. 3 twin blades are going to be able to take down that prospector, but if he loses one of the twin blades, it may not actually be worth it. We'll have to see. No, he does not lose any of the twin blades, but the Apollo also doesn't go down. However, that prospector will be getting eliminated. Badger bombers drop their load, and there's going to be the magnetic satellites on top of that airfield. Nice use of the support power. Unfortunately for Dankal, he wasn't able to kill the airfield. I see a sentry bomber, which usually means Tanya. But we'll have to see. The Cryoblast does fire off. Cryogeddon, rather, and the Apollos, or not the Apollos, the Mirage tanks are going to be rushing forward, eliminating some of those V4 rockets. Twin Blades are going to be pushing forward to try to deal with this army, but it's not going to be enough. Some nice Terror Drone control here by Dankal is going to be keeping the Terror Drone alive, but also locking down those Mirage tanks. Some absolutely great control there by Dankal, and he is on top of that going to be actually losing the Terror Drone. So some not so good control by Dankal as he accidentally did lose that Terror Drone, but at the same time, he is going to be driving this army back. So once again, these two players have clashed, and then they've fallen back. They've kind of done huge, massive damage to each other, and then fallen back. So neither one of them has gained a huge advantage, but the advantage might be coming to Dankal as here comes the Kirov airship. Don't let Vindies know he has not spotted this. And this, children, is why it's important to scout, and of course, why it's important to have good map vision and map awareness. As if you don't, Kirov in your base. Kirov in your base, bombing your face, making a mess of your place. Goodbye, armor facility. There's almost absolutely nothing Vindies can do about stopping that Kirov from taking down the armor facility. He might actually be getting the ore refinery as well. I don't know, he might be losing. No, he's definitely going to be taking out that ore refinery. Takes out the harvester as well, so that means that the MCV is going to have to stay there. So let's see here, forcing the sell-off of the multi-gunner turret. That Kirov was definitely effective. It definitely paid for itself, and actually going to be doing about 3/4 damage to that power plant, which means if there is a satellite downpour ready, he will be able to take that down. Akula sub heading in. He needs to take out the hydrofoil before he realizes what's going on. Yes, that's exactly what Dankal does in the middle of the map. We do have V4s going to be firing off their rockets. At the same time, we do have a multi-gunner turret, which is going to be getting eliminated there. No sell-off from Vindies, but he's got a nice infantry army. He's got a sizable force, and at the same time, that Akula sub is now going to be starting to work down. Oh, and actually mass sell-off. So Vindies is currently at a very, very weak position. He replaces his now 3rd refinery that was already taken out. Or, yeah, he was taken out. I don't think he got the sell-off on it. He was able to sell off the armor facility, but this is pretty much the one-stop shop for Vindies. He's got this one chance to make it work. He's going to be able to take out 2 of the V4s, which kind of stops Dankal from being able to just sit in his base. It's going to be forcing him to engage. The hammer tanks are way out of position, but Natasha should be getting some nice shots off on this mostly infantry composition. The last V4 rockets are going to be firing off, and I'm assuming a Badger bomber will be swooping in. That Desolator airstrike is going to be dropping the chemicals and almost trapping that V4 rocket, but Vindies is in such a severely weakened position. I mean, if you think about it, he lost like 4.5, almost 5 grand worth of stuff in those buildings. He was able to sell them off, so he sold off the armor facility and the multi-gunner turret. But other than that, he wasn't able to really do anything against that Kirov. He was able to, of course, take the Kirov down. And he does have the efficient economy support power upgrade, the high trade upgrade. So he does get boosted resource collection rates, as you can see right there, 312 credits for every load of ore. But he is 3 refinery allies versus 4 refinery Soviets. And potentially a 5th refinery will eventually be thrown down by Dankal. And he also has a large number of hammer tanks, but he's mostly just waiting for the engagement to come to him. He knows that he is in the lead. He knows that he is severely hurt Dankal. Oh, this is actually a nice use of that Cryogeddon, because it's going to be allowing Vindies to push on forward and potentially snipe down Natasha. Yes, he does get Natasha, which means these infantry, can they actually do the damage? The hammer tanks can be getting some great crushes off, but the Athena cannons were able to work down some of those V4s, and that is what Vindies needs. But can he stop this hammer tank army? The Mirage tank is going to be getting some shots off, but it is getting locked down by that Terror drone. Fully heroic hammer tanks are going to be pushing in here as a fully heroic Mirage tank does go down, and the Athena cannons are now going to be feasted upon. And this is what... Oh, no. Vindies does actually have a... Oh, Sentry Bomber. Never mind. Never mind, Sentry Bomber. Go home. You did nothing. Dankal was like, hey, you know what's really great? The X key. He slammed that X key. He split his hammer tanks. And that was the end of that. That Sentry Bomber was not very effective. I mean, he was able to clean up a couple of hammer tanks, but really, he didn't do all that much with that. And at the same time... He's actually going to be transporting bullfrogs onto the low ground so that he can get those extra shots off onto the air forces, although he does have to be pretty careful here, as actually here comes Tanya to try to take down those bullfrogs, but no, Tanya does time belt backwards and is able to get under the Aegis shield of that Athena cannon. Once again, those Terror drones locking down those expensive, higher-tech units, and actually this one multi-gunner turret is what is saving that Athena cannon. Wasn't enough to actually save Tanya, as the Apollo does get taken out as well, but Dankal, he's slowly getting whittled away. He is going to be bringing in reinforcement V4s, which is going to be very important, and he does definitely have a superior economy to his opponent. However, of course, that oil derrick has been around for a fair bit longer. The Sentry Bomber once again coming in will be able to clean up clean up like a bear, and that was pretty much the only thing that it actually cleaned up. Both of these players taking some losses, but I'm pretty sure Vindies is taking definitely heavier losses as another Mirage tank does go down. Dankal at the same time, he's trying to push, and what are you doing? Actually, these isolated V4s is a terrible idea, as if those Mirage tanks rush forward, the V4s will have no defense inside of that minimum range. But at the same time, the MCV does go down, and also, we actually did have, wow, the Defense Bureau did actually get constructed. Vindies potentially going for a super weapon there, as I didn't see any Prism Towers get thrown down, but Dankal able to take that victory. And Vindies just kind of getting outclassed in the last couple of minutes there, but certainly for the first half of that game, he was playing quite well alongside of the monster Dankal, and he was playing pretty evenly in that match. Just some of those engagements did not go the way that he wanted, and I mean, he wasn't necessarily with the strongest army composition for the majority of that game, focusing a lot more on infantry, but he never got the killer engagement with the shrunk down hammer tanks that he needed to really crush his opponent's army and push forward for the victory. So Dankal taking that match between him and Vindies. A pretty solid match overall, with some mistakes from both players, but that is to be expected. No one is perfect. And that will about do it for this match. Thank you very much for watching. And real quick here. Wow, 7,000 credits, or no, 3,000 credits, as that is not 111,000. That is 101 versus 104, as Dankal only 3,000 credits in the lead. But really, let's take a look at that resource graph. The 4th refinery being established just a little bit before for Dankal. Vindies was behind slightly. And then I'm assuming the oil derrick, that's when it got sniped somewhere in here, and that's what evened things up. And then, yeah, right about the time that they became equal, Dankal was like, nope, you don't get a 4th refinery anymore. Or a 3rd refinery, for that matter. And then suddenly, Vindies was behind. And that was the point of no return. Not spotting that Kirov, and also not having anything to deal with that Akula sub. I mean, those were just two very expensive units, but the Akula sub never got taken out, which means that Vindies could never safely expand to the water, even if he did have build radius out there, which he, of course, did not. But he could never safely expand to that water with a clear conscience and be able to sleep at night because of that Akula sub, killing all of his stuff. But that will be doing it for this match. Thank you very much for watching, and this is Sybert signing out.